everybody. It's great to see everybody here. I'll preface this meetup with my experience with going to electric fuel pumps from mechanical. When I bought my Corvair, like many of you, it had a mechanical pump on it, and it worked until it didn't. Then I bought another mechanical, and then that one failed. And then I bought another mechanical one, and then that one failed. And then I bought another mechanical one, and then that one failed. So I think in the first 4 years that I owned that car, I think I went through 8 mechanical fuel pumps. I live in California. We have a lot of ethanol in our gas. It seemed like the quality of them just got worse and worse. And I finally last year decided I wanted to do an electric fuel pump. So I consulted a little bit with our chapter, and I got some insight. But then I went online and I was looking some more about different forums, and I went to Facebook and to all the places you guys all go to. And I just kind of cobbled together information. A lot of the information is out there. A lot of great information is in the tech guide. Unfortunately, with some of the stuff that's in the tech guide, it's a little bit dated. I think one of the sentences in there when I was looking at the conversion one was, well, you can go to the junkyard and there'll be a bunch of Vegas there and you can grab one off of Vega. Well, I don't know the last time I saw a Vega in a junkyard or on the road or likewise. So I thought, okay, well, this is a little bit dated. So I was able to glean a lot from a lot of different places. And I kind of put together my own list. I even went to Clarkson, looked through their catalog to see what they had and in their setup. We'll talk a little bit about that. But this presentation, just so you guys know, is it's very elementary. I consoled a couple of Corvair gurus when I was putting this together, but I by no means am a Corvair guru. I'm a weekend garage mechanic. Usually I keep my cars in the driveway because the garage is full of tools and projects and other stuff. So I'm under jack stands like a lot of you guys, wrenching away and trying to figure out the best way I can to keep the car running. And that's the reason for this presentation, is because these pumps are just, the mechanical pumps are just getting worse and worse. And I wanted to present everybody with a current way to go to electric with parts and methods that are available, right now, and that are affordable to all of us. We can do it ourselves. We don't have to, if we got the time and we got a handful of tools, we can do this in our driveways or in our garages or our fields or wherever we're at. We don't have to necessarily pay a mechanic $500 to $1,000. That's California prices. It may be different where you're at, but to make this conversion. So on that note, I'll go ahead and start the slideshow. And like I said, this is starting off as if somebody's going to watch this, on YouTube, or even maybe who's in this group who's never done this before or is relatively new to Corvairs. It's going to be very elementary and very basic of just how to go about doing this. So I'm going to share the screen here. All right, so here we are, electric fuel pump conversion, September 2021 meetup. So why electric? Well, we've kind of gone over that a little bit. If you're sitting on this meetup or looking at the YouTube presentation, one of two things has probably happened. You finally had it with the mechanical pumps on your car failing and leaving you stranded out on the side of the road. A crankcase with a mix of raw fuel and motor oil, or worse. And worse being that, your car may have caught on fire. You've heard the horror stories about current mechanical pumps on the market and are looking for help making the swap or to go over to electric before the above happens to you. Let's see here. So mechanical pumps on the market have had a real fall from grace from their Delco predecessors. Current pumps have been found to have springs plumbing upward of 12 psi, where the Corvair engine needs a maximum of about 6 psi. On the mechanical pumps recently purchased, it's been noted by Corsa members that the one-way valves have either been installed backwards or sometimes they're missing altogether. In some recent cases, I think the New Jersey chapter did a whole presentation on this, but it was noted that the new pumps are missing, they don't have the drilled indentation that locks the bolt that goes to hold the pump in place. So that's no good. I was consulting with Larry Claypool on this before we got going, and to our knowledge, there's only one company currently manufacturing mechanical pumps, and they are out of China, and the quality control on them is not very good. So now we get to what type of pumps should we buy? So first off, this is not an area to cut corners on or cheap out on. Fuel pumps can cost from anywhere from $20 to $100+. We would recommend spending the extra money and getting a pump that will operate safely and for a long time. Many higher end pumps also have a warranty in the event of a defect or a failure. Cheap pumps found on Amazon or eBay or wish.com have little to no quality control, are quickly and cheaply made, and may fail quickly or be bad right out of the box. Fight the temptation, don't go cheap. So there's a few types of electric pumps on the market. We're really going to focus tonight on the solenoid pumps. Those are the most common aftermarket ones, and they seem to be the ones that work best for our Corvairs and are reasonably priced. There's a bellows types pump, which was it's an older style pump, but they're loud, they were big, and a lot of the modern fuels don't allow, or they cause them to break down rather quickly. There's also rotary vane pumps. These can be used on Corvairs, but often they have a really high PSI output. Usually they're for larger displacement engines, or in the Corvair world for racing applications where a lot of cars are running more at wide open throttle. And then there's a gear rotor pumps, which are also very commonly used these days, and they're used as an OEM on newer modern vehicles. So a lot of times, with fuel injection, things of that nature. But we have heard of them working on Corvairs. But tonight's focus, just to kind of keep it simple, is we're going to work with the solenoid pumps. So what's a solenoid pump and how does it work? Here's a very brief and elementary definition from our friends at sciencing.com. A solenoid consists of a helix and a wire wrapped in an iron or steel core. The core becomes magnetized when the electrical current passes through the coil. This is the basis of the pump. They're one of the simplest types of pumps because they have very few moving parts. When the current is applied to a solenoid pump, the electromagnetic core moves against the spring to slide a diaphragm into the discharge position. When the current is removed, the diaphragm slides back into place into the suction position. They're easy to install, readily available, have a long life, and are relatively cheap, excuse me. There's a number of solenoid pumps available on the market. When making your decision, ask yourself if you want to do this project again anytime soon. If the answer to that is no, then spend a little bit extra money on a quality pump. The Corvair vendors sell quality pumps that will work for our cars. After researching different forums and asking a few different mechanics and Corvair gurus, I personally decided to use the facet pump. The most important thing to remember is that you want a pump that operates between 4 and 6 PSI. Nothing higher than 6 PSI is needed for street driving. People get starry-eyed over high performance or a lot of these are things that for 95% of us we're not going to need in our cars. We're running 140 engines tops, mostly, sometimes 180 if you got a turbo. 4 to 6 PSI is perfect. It makes the car happy, it makes it run. Anything more can either cause problems or is completely unnecessary. For the facet pumps, there's two types and styles and part numbers that will work for our Corvairs. There's a cube style pump and then the round can pump. And the part numbers are listed here, and we'll go over these part numbers again later on. And there to the left, you can see the cube style, and to the right, you can see what's called like the can style. So before we start, we need to know what are the tools and or parts that we're going to need for this project. If you're doing this in your garage or in your driveway, here's some of the tools you need for the job. An electric jewel with a 5/16 inch bit, and also a 3/4 inch hole saw for 65 to 69 cars. Hex head bits to remove the tunnel covers, a wire cutter and a crimper, screwdriver, pliers and vice grips, floor jack and jack stands, a lift if you have it, and then a fuel siphon line. Aside from the fuel pump, there's a few more items that you'll need to complete this job. You'll need an inline fuel filter. You'll need 6 hose clamps, a pump block, a plug or a dummy plate, safety controller, switch, 12 feet of 18 gauge wire and electrical connectors, a rubber fuel hose. We'll go into that a little bit later, and then zip ties and or electrical tape. So not a lot of parts, not a lot of equipment. This is something that it seems daunting, but pretty much anybody can do it. And then we also want to talk about safety. PPE and safety gear. We're dealing with gasoline. We're dealing with fumes. This may be the most important part of the job. Do the project in a well-ventilated area. Wear gloves and safety goggles. Guaranteed, I mean, unless you're putting in a brand new fuel tank, you will spill some fuel and there will be fumes coming from the tank. Protect yourself. Fuel in the eyes hurts. Have some fuel absorbent and a fire extinguisher at the ready. A second person is always a good idea too. Incandescent light bulbs in your garage or on your drop lights can cause an explosion if exposed to fuel vapor. Part of the fire triangle fuel, heat, and oxygen. Consider swapping over to LED lighting or doing the project with alternative lighting, like outside with the sun. Run a fan and open the doors if you're going to be working inside. So the first step is going to be draining the fuel tank. First, get the car up in the air, either by a lift or a jack and jack stands. Make sure the car is secure and safe to get under. I posted this picture on here. I know a lot of times for brand new Corvair owners, I've actually had a couple of guys in our chapter reach out. They didn't know how to jack the car up, and they're a little bit afraid to do it. This is one of the early unibody designs, so they didn't know where to place the jack stand. They didn't want to damage anything, and then also where to place the jacks after you're done. If you see the arrows here, many of you guys probably already know this, so this is old news, but for those of you that don't, these are the proper places to jack or to place your jack stands once you actually have the car up in the air. They're pinch points on all four corners, after the front tires and before the back tires. The car will stay steady there. It's a safe place to put it where it won't damage the vehicle, and it'll be safer for you to get under. All right, now there's a couple of ways to drain the tank. One way is to go and buy a siphon pump like what's in the photo, and you can siphon the fuel out from the tank through the nozzle or through the fuel inlet, and you can use a bulb pump siphon hose, and then you just pump, and eventually once it gets vacuum, it'll go ahead and drain your tank out. You will have quite a bit of fuel still left at the bottom of the tank using this method. The way that I did it was to grab some fuel hose, and I actually hooked it up to the metal line by the firewall, and then I hooked up the solenoid pump to an external car battery that I had, and I pumped it into a can that way. It removed all the fuel from the line, and it got 95% of the fuel out of the tank. When you remove the rubber hose from the tank to the metal line, from the fuel tank, excuse me, to the metal line, there will be some residual fuel left either in the tank or the line. Be ready for it. It may be a small puddle of fuel, but fuel smells strong, and it can cause problems. So just be ready for it. All right. So installing the fuel pump. Here's a photo that I grabbed. I'll cite this author at the end of the presentation, but I thought it was a good photo of a cube pump located in a late model Corvair. Now that your fuel tank is empty and your car is up in the air, you're ready to make the swap. You'll want to mount the pump as close to the fuel tank outlet as possible. I've only done this on an early model, but from what I've gathered, there are slight differences from the early models, the late models, and the forward controls, trucks and vans. So I'll focus on the early model while highlighting differences for the late model and for the FCs. And then also too with these pumps push, they don't pull. So having them located by the firewall or even worse in the engine bay or somewhere along the fuel line, they won't work as effectively. They may not work at all. They like to push. So you want to have it as close to the fuel line as possible, or as close to the fuel tank as possible. And also the gravity from the fuel will help that pump draw suction and push out. All right, so the first thing you'll want to do is decide exactly where you want to mount the pump. You'll want to mount on the cross member of the car as closely as possible to the hole where the fuel sender outlet connects the main fuel line that runs under the car. These, as I just mentioned, these pumps are meant to push and not pull, so the closer to the tank, the better. And then also, I've actually seen a couple of cars. One of them I bought, but I've seen a couple of cars with the pumps towards the rear of the car mounted. One I saw, it was mounted above the differential on the back side of the firewall. And in a car that I actually bought, the fuel pump was mounted inside of the engine compartment. So you want to mount as closely to the fuel tank as possible. When mounting, position the pump where you want it. Mark the mounting holes and either mark them with a silver pen, you can mark them with a punch, or you can scratch the mark with a scribe. Again, you want to mount this pump on the cross member frame rail. It's not advised to mount on the floor pan or on the toe pans. This will result in a lot of noise in the cab when driving. When I mentioned this to one guy, a longtime member of our local chapter, he likened the sound to machine gun fire. So you don't want that sound when you're out going for an afternoon cruise or going to a car show, or if you're in a parade. not a pleasurable driving experience. So you want to double check your markings and make sure that nothing is behind the rail before you drill. You don't want to drill a hole into anything like a gas tank, or any electrical wiring or some other tube that might be there. And then you'll want to go ahead and make your mounting holes. Once your holes are in, you want to mount the pump. For early models, it may take a little bending to get the mounting bracket and pump to fit together. There's not a lot of clearance down there, but if you play around with a little bit, you'll and be patient, you will get it to fit. And this is information, I haven't done it on a late model yet, but this is information that I've gathered online and also from my conversation with Larry. But for a late model, there's a little bit of differences where you'll want to get a 3/4 inch hole saw. You want to hold the pump assembly with the mounting strap attached up to the frame rail just behind the gas tank. Mark the side of the tunnel where the outlet line of the pump will line up. Double check before you drill your hole so you won't be drilling into any wires or any lines on the other side. Once your hole is drilled, insert a rubber grommet into the newly cut hole and mount your pump. For an FC, there's some additional instructions also for mounting. Hold the pump assembly up on the frame rail just behind the tank. Make sure that the pump will be in a place where it will not interfere with shift linkage at the manual transmission. Drill a 5/16 hole in the lower lip of the rail and secure. Depending on the pump you choose, you may need to cut a section of the steel fuel line to fit the pump and the fuel filters. Pump with internal fuel filters should have no issues. A quick note on choosing the correct fuel hose. If you get the kit from one of the vendors, you're good to go. For a lot of you guys, that might be the best way to do it. It's just one-stop shopping. You go to Clark's, you buy the kit, the ultimate kit, you get everything, and you get great instructions. For those of you who are putting this together from scratch, picking pieces here and there, you may want to make sure that you choose a fuel hose that is ethanol resistant, has the wall strength to handle the pump drawing the suction off of it. I did a lot of research with this and ended up going with the Continental model number 65127 hose. So 5/16 inner diameter with a 250 PSI burst strength. I also bought the 25-foot roll from Amazon. It's USA made hose. The hose can also be used for PCV applications. At the time of this presentation, it's about $24 a roll. All right, so back to the installation. Once the pump is secure, take some of your bulk fuel hose or what is provided to you if you buy a kit and connect the line from the tank to the fuel filter and then from the fuel filter to the inlet of the pump. Make sure to put your clamps on the hose before attaching and then tighten the clamps once the hoses are attached. Your pump may also have an internal fuel filter, but it doesn't hurt to have an additional fuel filter in the line. Grab another piece of hose and run it from the outlet of the pump to the main steel fuel line that runs to the back of the car. Then tighten those hose clamps. And here's a couple of photos. The photo on the left of the cube pump, I got that offline, and you can see on the left-hand side, I believe, where they actually had to drill through with the hole saw to get that other line in. Unfortunately, with this photo, it doesn't look like they used a rubber grommet to go around that cut. Those cuts are sharp. Anytime you're dealing with any kind of hose or line or even an electrical wire, if you're running it through a metal hole in the car, you want to make sure that you have a rubber grommet around that, so that way over time it won't rub on that hose line and cause it to fail, or in the event of a electrical wire, causing it to short out. On the right hand side is actually this is what was mocked up and prepped underneath my car before I made the final installation. So there's the facet can pump. And under the 64, that's my floorboard right there, and then that's the rail. I mean, it just gets in there, and I had to finagle the mounting bracket a tiny bit to get it in, but once it's in, it's locked in, and it's not going anywhere. And on that particular pump, the negative ground is actually is the bracket, so there's no extra wiring besides that to go with it. For the fuel filter, I used an Earl's. I kind of went big on that. You don't have to get super expensive with those, but I would recommend not getting the cheap plastic ones, especially if something that's going to be exposed to rocks and debris, things of that nature. Here's another photo that I found that I thought was really good too, where you can see the firewall from the other side. Again, on the left-hand hole, no grommet, but on the right-hand hole, there's a grommet. So you can see, the difference there where that hose is protected, and also that electrical wire is protected as well. All right, and now we're going to get to the safety switch, and this is the part sometimes where you start looking around and you're like, well, what am I going to get here? I mean, you know, you're getting the electric pump, but how do we want to have that safety switch set up for that? And there's a couple of options that I'm going to share here. These are the two, I would say, most common options, current options, and the safest. So there's a few different ways to go with the fuel or with the safety switch, but the most important thing is to make sure that you install one. So we're going to talk about three types. There's the Revolution Electronics fuel pump controller. There's the oil pressure shutoff switch, and then there's also the inertia switch. So the Revolution Electronics fuel pump controller, this controller gets power from a switched 12-volt lead and receives signal from a tachometer lead or the negative side of the ignition, on the negative side of the ignition coil if there's no tachometer. It primes the line for 3 seconds before the engine starts to eliminate any vapor lock. It also automatically shuts off when it loses a tach signal and resets itself after a minute. It's easy to set up and it's a very small footprint. And it's also made in America, made in Southern California. So this is the method that I went on mine. It checked a lot of the boxes. It was really easy to install, and it's been working great. I'm really happy with it. So another option is the oil pressure shutoff switch. This shuts the electric pump off if you have an accident. In case there's a gas leak. The oil pressure style has been used for years and shuts the power off to the pump if the oil pressure drops or if the engine stops. No matter why the engine stops, the pump will stop. Cheap and available everywhere. Clark sells the kit with the inertia switches and instructions. Oops. All right, the inertia switch. In the event that you have an accident with the fuel leak and the engine is still running, the inertia switch will shut off the power to the pump if it senses an abrupt stop, as in an accident. So basically, like a heavy shake or an impact will cause this to trigger. The pump will be shut off. Even if the engine stays running, the switch has a reset. However, this inertia switch has one drawback. If your engine should stall while you leave it running, the pump can still keep running and could possibly flood out your engine with fuel. Clark's recommends that both the oil pressure pump and the inertia switch pump are bought and put in sequence with each other. And then installing the safety switch. Essentially, these all hook up the same. There's a 12-volt switch power. Hot when the ignition is on, you can run the wire to an unused terminal in the fuse box, or you can splice it into a switched wire into the ignition terminal or into the ignition switch on the ignition side. Do not tap off onto the coil, as it could drawing off the coil could result in poor performance. If you're using the Revolution Electronics controller, it may not respond at all. The ignition switch and the fuse box, they're closer. Better to go with those two options. Oops. Let's see here. So I'm gonna have to go back a couple of slides. I jumped ahead of myself there. All right.
You got all excited.
Yeah. Trigger happy finger. Okay, so when running the wire back to the engine bay, attach the new wire to the existing harness with zip ties. So basically, so when you have the tunnel pan off and you're running that wire back to the back of the car, you know, you already have that wiring harness that's going from the cab to the back of the engine. What I did on mine is I just grabbed a bunch of zip ties and I just zip tied that line all the way back till I got to the firewall. It's also good practice to do this in the engine bay. It kind of keeps everything nice and tidy. It'll be easy to find that line if you ever need it, and it'll also keep it from going stray. In some events, you can use electrical tape to secure the wire to the harness and present more of a stock look.
Hey, Josh, we got one question in the chat that you might want to handle now.
Okay.
It's asking, why did you pick the safety switch that you did?
The reason I picked that switch, honestly, was because of convenience. It just seemed like, from what I read, that particular switch, it's electronic. It resets. It primes the pump for 3 seconds once you start it. It's really actually I have one sitting here next to me, so I'll show you guys once the presentation is over. But it's just really well built. I actually contacted them and asked them a number of questions about the controller, and was very satisfied with the answers that I got from them. So it really boiled down to convenience for me, and the fact that and I didn't want personally, I didn't want a bunch of other stuff in the engine bay. I didn't want another switch in there. I didn't want, in some cases, maybe 2 switches in there. I wanted to keep the engine bay looking as is stock for this car as possible. And this controller allowed for that. And setting it up was so easy. I mean, I literally put it right next to the pump, wired them all together underneath the car, ran the wire up into the tunnel, and then just linked it to the ignition wire, and it was done, at least on that end. And then, and then running the wire back. But that was my personal reasons for doing it. And so in this photo, you can see where the new line is on here. And actually, this isn't my photo. I grabbed this. I think I might have grabbed this one from Larry, but you can see where that yellow line is. And what I did is I just grabbed zip ties all through the tunnel and just zipped and zipped and zipped and zipped, just to make sure everything was nice and tight. I didn't want that line, that electrical line, getting caught up, on my clutch cable or who knows what. So that was my reason for doing that as well. All right, so now we're going to work our way back to the engine bay. So now everything is set up underneath the car. We have the wiring set up to our ignition source. We have the wires connected to the pump. The pump is connected to the fuel line, and then the wires going back into the engine bay. For the Revolution Electronics one, in my case, that wire was also going back to the negative end of the coil, because I don't have a tachometer inside of my car. All right. So in the engine bay, as many of you guys know, I mean, you can go from mild to wild. You can keep a stock appearance with a dummy plate fixed into the shell of a mechanical pump, or you can install a plug where your mechanical fuel pump used to go, and plumb the lines from the firewall directly to the carburetors. For me, the dummy plate seemed to be the easiest route to go. I already had a defective manual pump, so that part was covered. I didn't really want to get the new metal fuel lines or bend my current lines. For this particular car, I also prefer to keep it stock appearance in the engine bay, so the dummy plate checked all those boxes for me. Disassemble the defective manual pump and take the guts out of the old pump. You can place the plate inside of the middle and then sandwich the top. So the top cap of the pump and then the bottom housing of it together, and then reuse your bolts to put it back in. You can also put the rubber in on the top and the bottom as well if you feel like it, and make it look more stock if you choose. In my car, I decided to do that just because it was already all out. I've taken it out and I've had guys look at it and they can't tell the difference between that pump and a stock fuel pump. So the pros on these, they're really easy to install. They keep a stock appearance. And then, I'm going to reference Clark's pretty much on everything on here, just because they're most of our go-tos. I do know that Raffi Corvair also carries this kit. I believe California Corvairs carries it as well. And I think Mike's Corvair Parts carries it as well. And I'm sure a lot of the other vendors carry them as well. But just for the sake of reference, we're going to use Clark's on these. And then the block-off plug is also an option if you're going to replumb your fuel lines. A word of caution, when replumbing your lines, please use steel lines with flared ends. I'm sure you've all seen the angry rubber hose comments in social media and on the message boards. While the hoses can break down from heat over time, the real area of concern with using rubber hoses is if a fan belt snaps. If a fan belt snaps, it'll cut through a rubber hose like butter. A steel hose has a much better chance of fighting off a snap fan belt. You guys have all seen them. I've seen them. We've even seen photos of them, and no rubber lines in the engine bay, and also no fuel filters, if you can help it, in the engine bay either, especially the cheap plastic ones. Fight the temptation. Don't do it. It's not safe. Those plastic ones, I don't even use them in the water pumper cars that I have. They seem to me like a time bomb, ready to go off. Opt for metal, replace them periodically, and you should be good to go. So here's the plug, and then the plug goes in to where the mechanical pump used to be. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen these before. It's a real clean look. A lot of different vendors have them. They're stainless steel, sometimes aluminum, and they look really sharp and very minimal. And they actually really blend in with the housing that they get mounted into. So this is my car. So you can see here, this is the old mechanical fuel pump that I disassembled and put the plate in, the dummy plate, and then I put the rubber on the top and the bottom, remounted it in, and it looks stock, so you can't see any difference. So this one, sorry, the picture was a little grainy when it blew up, but you can see the plug on this photo example. Again, it gives a very minimalist look. You will have to replumb your fuel line slightly in order to get this to work, but it's also another great option. And then here's a really clean one that I saw that I thought I'd share on here as well. You can see the bottom arrow is showing the block off, and then you can see the top arrow. So they have, it looks like a 4-way brass plug in there. And then there's also a little inlet and outlet brass plug where the main line feeds off into the carburetors. So now we'll have some part numbers and some links. So for the facet pumps, the best place that I've found for them, I mean, you can shop around. I'm sure you'll find them on eBay, Amazon, gosh, probably anywhere. But for the facet ones, which are the ones that at least that I really recommend them. I mean, you can use a AirTex. There's a bunch of different brands out, but Pegasus Auto Racing carries them both. These are the part numbers for both. And then if you go to Amazon, you can find the Continental 5/16 fuel pump hose. Part number on that is 65127. Amazon also carries the Revolution Electronics fuel pump controller. The part number for that is 12003. In my case, I got the Earl's fuel filter, but I mean, you can get fuel filters at any local auto parts store, any Napa store, Kragen's, O'Reilly's, what's the other one? AutoZone. They've all got them, but I would highly recommend staying away from the cheap plastic ones if you can help it. For the fuel pumps for Clark's, the Ultimate Fuel Pump Kit, Clark's number C10295 is located on the parts catalog page 65. You'll also find the 2 different plates there as well. Tools and safety equipment can be bought at your local auto parts store or a hardware store. I've noticed that Home Depot has been carrying a lot more, at least our local one has been carrying a lot more auto parts stuff lately. So it could be one-stop shopping there too. But you should be able to find your siphon hose with the bulb. Definitely eye protection, sometimes floor jacks and stands if you don't have them, a fire extinguisher, and then also the powder absorbent. Cat litter always works in a scratch, but if you get actual real chemical absorbent, it'll pick it up a lot quicker. Also your 18-gauge wire cutters and crimpers and connectors, hose clamps and zip ties, screwdrivers, LED portable lighting, and then also your drill and your drill bits. So I just wanted to give a couple of references and a couple of quick thanks. So some of the photos that I grabbed actually came off of Persh.org. He had some great pictures of a conversion that he did. So I snagged a couple of those because I really liked them and thought they'd be good for this presentation. I also wanted to give a very big thank you to Larry for helping me out on this. He gave me a lot of information and a lot of history about the electric fuel pumps and our Corvairs with them. So I really do appreciate that. Corvair Tech Guide Volume 1. If you don't have the tech guides, I highly recommend getting them. There's so much information in there. And a lot of times when you see a question on Facebook, or if you see a question in the forums and you see somebody answer it right away, it's because they probably got it right out of the tech guide that was sitting next to them. That's where so much of this information is. Some of it might be a little bit dated, but for the most part, it's really still relevant for our cars. I also some of our local chapter members helped me out along with this too. And then they also, some of them gave me support too when I was running into snags on different stuff, which I'm sure a lot of your chapters do too. So if you don't belong to a local Corsa chapter, I recommend joining them. A lot of times too, even if you need a buddy to hold the fire extinguisher while you're doing the job, it's great to have another Corvair person there to do that for you. The forums, both great. I got so much information and continue to every time I come up with something, come up with something that'll stop me or hang me up. Usually if I go to the Corvair Center forum or Corvair forum, the answer's in there somewhere in the archive waiting for me. Clark's Corvair parts, you guys already know how great Clark's is, so no explanation there. And then also I wanted to give a little shout out to Dave Watson, to his YouTube channel. If you don't know about his channel, you should go check it out. If you're watching this on YouTube, once you're done watching this video, go look up Dave. He's got a lot of really helpful Corvair tips and tricks. And then I've used him. He was the first one that actually introduced me to the facet pumps. So I wanted to give him a little shout out for that. And the last slide I have, the final point on this is to learn something new, be safe, go slow, and the most important thing is to have fun. I think this is why we all do this. We love these cars. We want to have fun with them. We want to be seen and drive around in them. There's no better satisfaction than when your car goes down and you're able to fix it up. And that first drive after you fixed it up, and you did it yourself. There's really no better feeling around. So we definitely want to make sure that we're always having fun. I think that's probably the most important thing. So on that, I will stop the share. And
All right.
very,
Boy, I
very
love what you
quickly-
said at the end, having fun. That's what we're supposed to do with these cars. So,
That's right.
and
I
finding
mean,
people.
some of you might be daily driving them still, which if you are, oh man.
Oh.
But for the rest of us that just like to cruise around on the weekends or the very occasional drive to work, I mean, it's really more about having fun and and with the Corvair family, seeing your friends and spending time with your friends, So, but I did want to show you guys. I haven't made the conversion in my 65 yet, but I did buy the parts when I bought the parts for the 64, a couple of the parts anyway. So you can see this is the other Gold Flow facet pump. So you can see how big it is. I mean, it's not that big. It's pretty small. And this one also has an internal fuel filter inside of it. And you can just pop that off with the wrench, get inside of there, clean that filter out, pop it back on, and then you're good to go for another, however many miles. And then this is also, so you can see the size of it for the fuel pump controller, which is what we were talking about. I mean, you can see how small that is. I mean, it might be 1.5 inches by maybe 2 inches. And then on the back side of it, I should have had a better, this part's kind of last minute, but I did want to show you guys what it looked like though. But you can see there's like a little electronic chip on the back, but everything is sealed on there. So no moisture is going to get in there. No road grime. It might get on the outside of the case, but it's not going to get in the case. It's very secure. So I did want to share that with you all as well. And I did get a couple of questions before the meeting. One of them, I know some guys, and actually I was talking with Ray Morales a little bit about it too before we started, but about the about using an electric pump as a primer for your mechanical pump. I know that some of you probably still do that or are thinking about doing it. Which I don't want to detract you from it if you want to do it. But the question actually asked about using a switch to prime the pump. And then once the car started, for vapor lock, or if the car's been sitting for a long time, and then shutting the switch off. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but personally, I would probably go for like a button, like a toggle button. So that way you can press the button to get the pump going. And then once the line is full, then once you let go of that button, it'll stop the pump. And you may not, I mean, in the event that you're in a hurry to get to a show or to do something, you may not hit that switch off, or you may bump it with your knee when you're driving on the road, or who knows what. So, but with the button, it seems like that's a lot more of a fail safe to make sure that pump's not running when you don't want it to run.
All right, we got a lot of good questions here. I'm going to try to get through them. And I'll start with the one that asks, is there a big difference from the Airtex versus facet pumps? Is there a big difference?
Where they're made? I know that up until a couple of years ago, Airtex pumps were made in the Midwest. But to my knowledge, they're not. I think they outsourced them now. So they're either being made in Mexico or over in China. There may still be Airtex new old stock pumps on the shelves that are still American made. If you don't care about that, I mean, I think the pumps run well. The reason I went with the facet, they had a lot of sign-offs from transportation agencies that none of the other pumps had. So with the facet one, even like the Coast Guard and a couple of other maritime agencies signed off on the pump for marine use. And then it had a whole bunch. See, I got the box in front of me here. I don't think it has the names on it, but it had a list of different transportation agencies that signed off on it. The Airtex pump will be a little bit cheaper. it may be a little bit louder. I know that the facet pump is really quiet. If I'm out somewhere, if I'm at a show or if I'm at a meeting or a get together where there's a lot of cars and engines running or people talking, when I hit the switch to turn the car on and that facet pump kicks in, I don't hear it. If I'm in the garage at home, you know, with the garage door up, of course, you know, I can hear it, but I don't hear it otherwise. And my hearing is not the best, but I've you know, I know that some of these pumps can be really, really, really loud, and I know that this one's really quiet.
Even Jeff Gladden wrote a note that the facet can pump looks like the same one on my airplane. Surely the aviation model number is different and has more quality control and traceability. It's been a good one on the Piper. So that type of pump, I guess. Okay. There's a few comments more than anything. Someone made a comment about, why do you feel you need the inline filter? Isn't the stones in the carbs adequate?
Well, I've actually got an interesting story about that. So I don't know if you guys have been following along online. A good buddy of mine up here, Travis Fowler, actually just took his Greenbrier van and drove all around the United States in it. Like he's done this within the last 6 months. So he left his house in Sacramento and drove all the way down to the tip of Florida, drove through Yosemite, drove down into Mississippi and Alabama to visit his family, drove down to the tip of Florida and the Keys, and drove all the way up to the tip of Maine and came all the way back. He had to stop more than once because the quality of fuel that he got on the road was so bad that it gummed up his carburetors. And he actually pulled the stones off and sent me photos of them. And I mean, these things, it looked like he ran them through the sand in a couple of instances. And, you know, and then once he replaced the stones, he was good to go again. You know, it may be redundancy to have more than one filter, more than two filters. But personally, you know, living in California, again, you know, we get a lot of ethanol in the gas. So every spring I'm cleaning out the pumps anyway, I'm cleaning out the carburetors anyway. But if I can keep the sediment out of there, you know, I'll spend a couple of bucks for a second filter to do that.
Okay. Someone made a comment to be careful that you don't crush early model speedo cable at the driver's side rear. I guess that's a tip.
Okay.
Someone posted out there. And to select a fuel pump location where it's protected.
Yeah.
Here's a question. What would be a safe upper end PSI for carbureted application if one is considering a TBI or other injection application?
So for that one, actually, I had something written in there, and then I decided to, in the presentation, and I decided to pull it out at the last minute because I didn't really want to. I don't have a lot of experience with fuel injection, but there's a lot of guys out there that do. I would recommend reaching out either to the source. He knows a lot about fuel injection. American Pi, and that's Pi as in PI. Race Edmond, he knows a lot about fuel injection, and he actually sells tanks with the fuel pumps in them that are built for fuel injection. There are differences there that I know, but that's about, I know about as much as you do on that, because neither one of my cars are fuel injected. And then I would imagine Brown EFI too. I know Brown sells all of his stuff to Clark's, and I'm sure, you know, he'd be more than happy to give you information to point you in the right direction for the right in-tank pump, or from what I understand, the in-tank pump for a fuel injected car is really the only way to go.
Okay, that's good advice. What are symptoms of mechanical fuel pump failure?
Okay.
This was about electric fuel pumps, but.
No, that's all right, because that's why we switched, you know, I mean, and that's why I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about making the switch. Personally, for me, I can give you a few really good examples. One example is I drove down with a buddy of mine to in the car. We didn't trailer. We drove down Highway 101, almost 600 miles down to visit our friends Greg Vargas and South Coast Corsa for their show. And the car ran like a top the whole way down. Awesome. Top down the whole way. It was great. We had an awesome time. The day that we left, Sunday morning, me and my buddy both had to go back to work Monday morning. So we were going to bonsai it back up the 101 to get home. And we're pulling out of the hotel parking lot. And he looks over at me and says, "You smell fuel?" And this is 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, maybe even earlier. Might have been 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And I said, "Yeah, I do. I think I smell fuel, And he says, "Well, pull into the 7-Eleven over here, and I'll jump out and I'll pop open the hood and take a look." So he pops open the hood, and he said that pump looked like a geyser, and it was just spraying raw fuel all over the engine. Luckily, the engine wasn't. I mean, it was hot, but it wasn't hot yet. And there was just gasoline everywhere. Luckily, we brought a backup fuel pump with us, stuck that fuel pump on the car, and it got us home. After we wiped everything down, we went inside that 7-Eleven and must have bought 3 rolls of paper towels and just wiped. And that pump got me home, and that pump lasted me about 2 months. And then my wife and I were going on a just a weekend day drive to San Francisco from our house, which is about 15 miles. And we were in a little bit of traffic, and all of a sudden I smelled raw fuel again. Turned the car around and came home. Didn't see any fuel in the engine bay anywhere, and I didn't see any leaks. But I opened up the oil cap and I smelled inside of there, and I could smell raw fuel inside of the crankcase. So I drained that, and that oil came out looking like lemonade, and it was just everywhere. So those are 2 examples for me personally, and I've had other ones where I put them on, and as soon as I put them on, they dribble. So, okay, so, you learn to kind of go in the star pattern and crank them down so they don't dribble anymore. But sometimes they're dribbling inside where you can't see them. And then they're just, the raw fuel's just flushing down into your crankcase, and you don't want that. And then, and then a couple of examples that I've seen recently is some of these pumps are pumping out like 12 PSI, which is just astronomical for our cars. And then one that I saw, and I can't remember who showed it to me, but it was missing the check valves inside of the pump. Like, they didn't even, the person took the fuel pump apart to see what was going on in there, why it wasn't working, and there were no check valves in there. So these are the problems that we're having. And I remember Alan Lackey mentioned to me not that long ago that they got a pump in, a mechanical pump, and like I said, the divot wasn't drilled in to lock it in. So these are the problems that are starting to come up with these pumps. I would recommend, if you're running a mechanical pump and you're running an old style Delco GM pump, talk nicely to it, give it a pat on the head every once in a while when you're looking under the engine bay, and keep running it if it's running good for you. But this is a good alternative when that pump finally does expire. So yeah.
Vince Petrie commented that I find it helpful to be able to hear the electric pump so that I know it's working. Sometimes they stick and need a light tap to free them up. If the pump is audible, then I know when it sticks. So I guess you have to use your nose for fuel and your ears for sound. So use all your senses for
and your eyes to detect leaks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and your hands to fix it. Yeah.
Someone did ask, Ken Lawler, is a fuel pressure regulator recommended for use in a turbo when using an electric pump? Show of hands. So one person replies they find it, but I don't know if you want to comment on that. I know you.
Yeah, my turbo experience is really limited. So yeah, I would defer to the guys that have been running turbos for a long time, and if it works for them, then it gets a thumbs up for me. Yeah.
Good. There was a question about the size, what size fuse to protect the pump circuit. Greg Navarro wrote, the wire size should agree with the fuse size, line 15 amp fuse and 14 AWG wire. So I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I put a fusible link in mine just to have it in there. It wasn't in any of the instructions, and it wasn't in any of the, nothing that I could find would say to do it, but I just decided to have it in there just in the event that it did surge. And I just put I believe it was a 15 amp spade that I just stuck. It was a spade link, so I just stuck one of those in there. But it's never blown. It doesn't really draw. It's drawing 12 volt, but it doesn't really draw. The power doesn't fluctuate. It's a constant. It's a constant rate on there. Where some things like your radio stuff you turn off and on, and your wipers and stuff like that, they're not getting a constant a constant 12 volt to them, only when they're switched, where this pump was, if the engine's running, it's switched. So Yeah.
Okay, I think I got to all the questions. There were a couple of comments in there that folks can read also. Unless anyone has any other questions, I'm going to wrap up by saying thanks, Josh.